Hi, I'm Ed Socia, North American Insight Director for datacenterHawk. Thanks for tuning into our Hawk Talk. We're coming to you today from the CBRE downtown Denver office, which is one of the most beautiful pieces of office real estate here in Mile High City. I am fortunate enough today to be joined by my good friend and former colleague, CBRE's Executive Managing Director of their Data Center Solutions platform, Mr. Pat Lynch. Pat, thanks for joining.
Yeah, this will be fun. Thanks for coming to Denver and excited to talk to you and catch up.
Likewise, my friend. Well, Pat, why don't you, let's kick it off with a little background about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been in Colorado since 1998. I've been with CB for a little over 13 years. Born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. Moved out here when we started a telecom company called Level 3 Communications, and many of my friends and fellow alumni are now scattered throughout the data center industry, which is kind of fun. And so I live in Denver. Have been blessed with 4 great kids, 3 of them here locally and 1 in Berkeley, California.
I love it. The Level 3 Mafia, we've heard a lot of the stories. So, about 6 years ago, you sat down with datacenterHawk's own David Liggett and shed some light on the industry and what you guys had seen going on. One thing you talked about was the importance of hybrid IT as a demand driver in the digital infrastructure space. Cut to today, 6 years later, I guess how would you change that answer, or how would you, I guess it's better to say, how would you update that answer today?
Yeah, wow, that's a good one to start with. First of all, kudos to David and to all of you at datacenterHawk. You guys have built an amazing company, now global, and certainly an industry leader that we value the partnership with. So kudos to you and David and the team for that.
Thank you.
That was a fun conversation, and 6 years seems like last week for me, but I don't think, as visionary as David is and just being old and around the space as long as I have, I can't imagine either of us anticipated the scale at which the industry has grown. I can think of conversations, back then where a 5 or 10 megawatt facility was large scale. And today I'm finding myself on phone calls. And I caught myself just the other day saying, oh, it's only 20 megawatts. I'm not sure you've got enough power. And I just had to capture that. But, IT continues to grow. Hybrid IT is still a thing. Cloud computing is still a thing. But of course, the topic of interest that you can't open up a newspaper, certainly any business newspaper today, and not read about AI. So that has driven significant growth, and I think it will continue.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, I'm certainly in agreement there. It's funny because before I took a brief sabbatical so Pat and I worked together at CBRE for quite a while. And when I left, the sort of topic of conversation was edge computing. And I don't think it's gone away. But when I came back, I did see a headline somebody had posted on LinkedIn. Did edge happen and I missed it? ? Which I thought was very good. The conversation has certainly shifted to more AI and the machine learning side of things. So in that same vein, Pat, I guess, so historically low vacancy rates, power challenges, are highlighting some of the cruxes or headwinds, whatever you want to call them in our industry, the challenges that we face. And we're seeing data center providers start to kind of rethink their strategy of how and where they're building their data centers. So let's start with the where. CBRE's got boots on the ground in most of these markets. Let's focus on the primaries, I guess. What are you seeing in like a Northern Virginia, for instance?
Yeah. So the interesting thing with Northern Virginia, I think is those of us in the industry know, you read about there's no power. Right? Dominion has no power. But if you reference our latest research report, Northern Virginia delivered over 400 megawatts last year, right? It's a massive amount. So it's all relative to the amount of the demand. So I think there's a little bit of a misnomer in some of those markets. The other market that is starting to not that it's never not emerged, but Dallas is one of them. As we look at demand 2 years out, 3 years out, it does seem like the Texas region is a little more positioned today to adapt gigawatt type demand, and places like Georgia maybe struggling a little bit, and some conversations there about tax incentives and maybe pulling back on those until we look at the power things get figured out. So, and then you've got places like Silicon Valley, which are multi-years out and resulting in markets like Hillsborough and like Reno that have emerged as alternatives. So it's a very dynamic market. I don't envy the challenges that the utility companies have. You look at the historical amount of power that some of these markets required, and in some cases, that amount is going to double in the next 5 years, predominantly driven by technology. So I think, and we can also talk a little bit globally, because this isn't a U.S. or North America problem, right? You look at Singapore's essentially out of the data center business, and that's creating some unique things that the end user clients have to do to adapt. Similarly, Ireland, right? So we're watching areas like the Nordics, which could be fascinating. But every time you go one place, then particularly you think about Europe and Asia, you've got data sovereignty issues that you have to deal with that are requiring certain applications to be in market. So I'm on the back 3 holes of my career, but it's going to be a fun end, and it's going to be fascinating to see how this is going to play out over time, because I don't see the demand going down at all. I think it's going to continue for the next several years.
So to continue to talk about these primary markets, and we talk about space and power constraints, we're seeing folks not necessarily go to they're certainly going to secondary and tertiary markets, but we're also sort of seeing this emergence of sub-markets, sort of a primary market adjacent. So think that I-95 corridor in Northern Virginia, Fauquier County, Culpeper, Spotsylvania, Louisa, all the way down to Henrico, which is Richmond's county. That whole I-95 corridor is starting to see activity from those hyperscale users, and then obviously the colo guys behind it. Similarly, in the Dallas market, we're seeing stuff come up from Austin, up that I-35 corridor, and move down. A lot of sites, or a lot of land banking rather, in South Dallas and Red Oak and Lancaster. So, I guess as folks who need to be in the primary markets kind of move to those sub primary markets, let's call them that, you've got the other folks that are saying, you know what, let's go somewhere new. Let's go to a secondary, let's go to a tertiary market. Let's find the next big market for data centers. So if we put primaries aside and we think about secondary and tertiary markets, where do you think that the ball's going there?
Yeah, I think secondary is evolving in a weekly or monthly basis, right? There's a big project announced in Mississippi, right? You're seeing things going to Indiana. And Gordon Dalvern, our research leader, who assumed your role and is an incredibly sharp guy, him and I have been saying for the last year that the game is changing to, instead of bringing the power to the site, our clients are bringing the site to the power, right? And that kind of touches on the question you're asking us. And it's absolutely happening, right? So where you have sites, and in some places you've got markets that are very cost competitive, Indiana being one of those examples. Ohio is, it was Columbus, then it was New Albany, now it's essentially the state. They have a competitive utility rate, they have competitive taxes, and when you think about broadly the expenses of operating a data center, we think about it in terms of roughly 70% of your operating expenses are tied to those 2 line items. So if you can be in a market and you're building a 100 megawatt or more facility, being in a place that has those low cost factors for those 2 items is hugely important. But you have to have the power available, right? So as I think about that, and when you talk about your corridors, I would agree with what you're saying. I think the way we're thinking about it is the circle that people used to draw around Ashburn or Dallas, that circle is getting larger and larger, and predominantly because they have to. They simply need more compute, and it's not in those areas. So that's changing the game a little bit. A little bit of a related story. I was fortunate to be in Richmond, Virginia, about 4 weeks ago, attending and spoke at a conference of economic development and utility folks. It was fascinating. A lot of the major data center markets were represented there, particularly for kind of the eastern half of the U.S. And the topic of it wasn't just a data center event, but not surprisingly, the topic of data centers was pretty popular with this group. And I think part of it is, data centers can get I think there's a misnomer, and we as an industry need to do a better job of it. But when you think about a large data center in a tax incentive environment, delivers massive tax to that community, because you think about the personal property taxes and how much that drives. And they create a lot of jobs to build these facilities, but then the misnomer is, well, they don't create jobs after. Well, the reality is they also don't put cars on your road. Right. They don't occupy seats in your schools. They are actually a very nice, and I think the reason some of these major cities that you talked about continue to want to grow data centers is they're now starting to realize there's a lot of economic advantages to them. So I think, again, the industry's got to get better. We have some significant issues, kind of going off a little bit of a tangent, forgive me, but we have to get better at sustainability, right? That's a massive topic for us as a society, a global society, and being a massive user of utility-powered data centers, need to be and are focused on that. And I think you'll see that play out over the next several years.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Pat. And let me just say, no one knows tangents better than I, so no worries there. I completely agree. I think if we look back to the mid-2000s when Buddy Reiser came to Loudoun County and worked with the Loudoun County Economic Development Board, and they incentivized folks to really build up that market that is now the largest data center in the market, the largest co-location data center market in the world, second to none. And you think about what folks can do to bring that activity to their market. Like you say, there's tax incentives. I know here in Denver, Excel has some power incentives for data centers. We're starting to see in markets like Atlanta, they're lifting those sales tax and use abatements, or putting a moratorium on them, I should say, because of the rapid growth of data centers. And bringing it back to the AI conversation, like you said, there's 10, 15, 20 megawatts is no longer a massive requirement like it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Now we're seeing folks do 2, 3, 4, 500 megawatt campuses. So let's take a look at the development in our backyard. Is the greater Denver area emerging as a potential data center market? There's some development in the pipeline, and we've got no shortage of data center executives who call this home.
Yeah, I think I would broaden the question to be more Rocky Mountain.
Sure.
Right. So we're seeing a lot of activity in Colorado Springs, lower utility cost, a lot of military opportunities in that market. So I think if you look up and down the Front Range, there absolutely is an increased amount of activity. I think that's going to continue. Part of it is driven. It's we're in a unique spot. Maybe part of it tied back to the number of level 3 executives that still reside here for obvious reasons.
Yep.
And I moved here in '98 and thought I'd be here for 4 years, and they're going to have to drag me out kicking and screaming. But so I love Denver, and it has uniquely positioned itself with both headquarter companies, but also large presence of data center executives, even if they're not headquartered here, which makes it kind of an interesting and a great market for talent, by the way, as well. So I think, but on the pure compute side, we are seeing significantly more activity, existing players that are looking to expand, new players looking to come into the market. There has been conversations about some incentives. Colorado's not historically been a great market for incentives. Sure. I can remember when we were looking here for the level 3 headquarters, and we were looking at 3 or 4 different markets, and I only half kiddingly said that the governor at the time took us outside and pointed to the mountains and said, "We'd love to have you." And that was the incentives. Only slightly kidding, but it worked, right?
Yeah.
We located here, and we were able to move talent because it's such a great place to be and a great lifestyle, as you know. So I do think you'll see more activity here. I'm not sure the incentives. There's some momentum to get those done. I hope they get done. I think eventually they will. Time will tell if it's this year, next year, in the future. But it will have a meaningful impact. Back to my comment about changing the mindset that these are wonderful parts of the economic engine behind a community, not just for tax reasons, but
Sure.
the jobs that they create, the opportunity to grow tech outside of
Right.
the data center itself because of your proximity to it. So I'm confident that we're going to see some growth in the Rocky Mountain area.
I love it, and I would love to see it. So let's focus on the green machine for a second and CBRE's global data center practice. I guess, what is your approach, you being the collective view, the broader CBRE digital infrastructure team, data center solutions, however you guys are calling yourselves these days, from an international standpoint, what have you guys changed in the last couple of years to position yourselves well to be able to sort of adapt and continue to grow this data center presence around the world?
Yeah, I'm humbled, blessed, and very proud of what we've created, and we as a collective we. And I'll go back to when the company recruited me 13 years ago and had the foresight to think, hey, there might be something here. And our revenue was a minute number, didn't even register. But we invested in a management team. Mm-hmm. We invested in a couple very strategic recruits that helped us grow the business and kind of change the mindset. And so then flash forward, we acquired NEF, which we now categorize as our network advisory business. We talk oftentimes about, a data center without connectivity is a really expensive refrigerator, right? So that network component, not only for data centers, but for the traffic going in and out of those data centers. So we're doing rooftop advisory. We're doing a significant amount of work on the front end for some of our clients looking to acquire data centers, and being able to tell the existing or potential connectivity story is hugely important. So that was a very strategic acquisition. Obviously, the company had to support that, and they did. And then, the other piece is our operations business. When I started 13 years ago, that business was focused on enterprise, think banks, insurance companies, right? We had a group of talented individuals that showed up every day and operated corporate data centers. Obviously, if we didn't shift, that business has somewhat gone away. We still do that, but the majority of our business on the operations and project management side is massive scale, 100+ megawatt facilities, very dedicated full-time resources. Business, we're somewhere north of 3,000 people at CBRE that wake up every day and go to work at a data center.
Yeah.
So that part is compelling. And then now going to your question about the global side, I like to share this statistic with internal as well as external people. If you look at the 10 largest publicly traded REITs by market cap, 5 of them are in digital infrastructure.
Yeah.
That causes people in the CB world's eyes to raise. That's a fact. And then if you look at the occupants of the data centers that you and I look at, track every day, it's a conglomerate of Fortune 50, mostly Fortune 20 companies. Mm-hmm. It's a global business. The investors, the occupiers, the operators are global. And thankfully, again, our leadership had the foresight a couple of years ago to say, we need to run this as a global business, and we now do that. So I run the advisory and transaction side and consulting side of our business. And my good friend and colleague, Neil Johnson, is based in London, and he's built an amazing team that's operating data centers all around the globe. And he was in Japan the other day, and we're communicating, and I'll be in India later this year. And I feel just incredibly fortunate that to get to work with an amazing team, very unique team of global resources to support our clients, which is 100% the reason we've been able to grow the business like we have.
Yeah. Well, you certainly built an incredible team around the world. I think of Andrew and in EMEA and Dedi and APAC, and I remember bringing on Prashant in India. So it certainly speaks to, kind of this growth and this connectivity, not to pun completely intended, to say, we need boots on the ground in these markets, and data centers are not just specific to North America. They're not just specific to EMEA. They're going to cover the globe. So I think you guys are well positioned to continue growing with that growing demand and the growing requirements around digital infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ed. I can't forget Rodrigo and Allison.
And Rodrigo, sorry, Rodrigo.
I've been fortunate, and I wish I could do more of them, but a couple of our biggest clients on the occupier side, but also on the investor side, we'll jump on a call, right? We'll get on a video call and literally do a trip around the globe, and I'm just there to listen. And it's absolutely amazing and humbling to see those experts that you mentioned and their colleagues talking about Africa, and then we jump to India, and now we're going to go to Japan, and now we're going to go to Sao Paulo or Uruguay, and there's no other company in the world that can do that, right? And I get chills telling you this story.
Yeah.
It's legit. It's genuinely an amazing team that CB is invested in, and at least for now, I guess I get to play quarterback.
Yeah, I love it. Well, former Omaha high school football coach, I think you're doing a great job. Hey, Pat, if we were to write a book on data centers, and we think about today's activity being its own chapter, what would we title that chapter?
So you know me, I'm a blue-collar kid from Omaha, so this is not indicative of my reading, but I think it would be Power, Where Art Thou?
Yeah, I love it. That's excellent. It's the power story is like you say, it's certainly shaping the market, I think, more than anyone had ever imagined that it would. It's leading to these emergence of sub-markets, of primary markets, spill over into secondary and tertiary markets. And then I think people are going to have to get ahead of there's going to be a shift on the sustainability side, and sustainability is just the S in the ESG, right? There's a lot more that goes into it than that. But, we're starting to hear folks say, we don't want RECs. We don't want renewable energy credits. We want PPAs with renewable energy companies. But the other side of that coin is that, sustainability doesn't matter if you can't turn your data center on. You need to be able to find power for your data center. So I think that will certainly dictate the next few years of not just where is the power, but what is the power, how much is the power, and when can you get it?
100%. I pause you to, again, CBRE has seen there's a need in an industry and we invest. So recently we brought in Rob Bernard, who's our Chief Sustainability Officer based in New York. Absolutely brilliant person. We're working very closely together for this exact reason, right? The data center world is a massive user of utility power and oftentimes creating headwinds for our clients that have set goals for sustainability. Mm-hmm. And then Stephanie Green, who happens to be also in Colorado, a fantastic resume in the sustainability world as well. And so I think about them and their recent move to CB to build a business similar to what I did 13 years ago. And what a great opportunity for us to partner. We talk a lot and we're on calls with different entities that are looking at what are the solutions, right? Nuclear, my own personal opinion, has to be a part of this. Whether it's small modular, whatever the solution is, that is, in a business that requires 100% power all the time, nuclear's got to be a part of it. And you think about biomass, and you think about all of the different things that people, thankfully way smarter than I am, are working on. That's part of the excitement. But in the short term, right, next, call it 3 years plus or minus, we just need compute. And I think there's been some articles written, we've been quoted in a couple, in the short term, we just got to turn up compute. And that's going to create some challenges for our clients and our own company when we think about what sustainability means and when can we achieve those goals. So that might be the next podcast episode, but because it's a massive topic and one we're talking about a lot. But in the interim, it's where can you get the power? And in many cases, you're taking what you can get.
Yeah, well said. Pat, my final question to you is, you and I are both Denver Nuggets fans. 41 points last night from Nikola Jokic against Minnesota. What do we think? Are they positioned to get another ring this year?
So my dream scenario, Ed, is Joker and McKinnon win MVPs. If you're not a hockey fan, that's the Colorado Avalanche. And we have 2 parades this year. So I'm not asking for much, but wouldn't that be an absolutely amazing thing? So I'm absolutely repeat for the Nuggets, and it's the Avalanche turn to do it again.
I love it, Pat. Well, thank you again for sitting down with us today. Thanks for hosting us in CBRE's beautiful downtown Denver office. It's always a pleasure to see you.
My pleasure. Let's do it again soon.